Guys, welcome back to another episode of Art of Fitness podcast. Today we've got a very special guest, someone who stepped in as a mentor for me and another group of athletes back during my own playing days, and really helped us sort through some very important topics, which we'll get into a little bit later. But we're here with Taneka Rubin. Thank you so much for traveling to join us. It means a whole lot. Taneka is the author and founder of Winners Win, also the coach for Montverde women's basketball, and also a former professional basketball player as well. So a bit of a stacked resume, to say the least. But she's here to help break down her journey, her story, and help us also learn how we can start to separate identity from performance, which is something that every athlete is going to need to hear at some point in their journey. So I guess we can just jump straight in by, can you share a little bit about what your athletic journey was and how you came to that identity question?
First of all, thank you guys so much for having me. Absolutely. Very cool intro, thinking about like how we met. So cool to see how far you've come. So
thank you.
Yeah, how I got into sports. Grew up with a military dad, and my parents had me around sports pretty early. I think I saw him with the basketball playing with his military buddies. Since then, I didn't put the ball down and had very involved parents who just kind of saw my drive, bought me a little Tykes hoop, and then the hoops got bigger and bigger, but never left the court. Just fell in love with the game. Lived in a small town, so that's really all we had to do was play sports.
So how far did sports take you, and when was the moment where you needed to draw a line between who you were on the court and who you were off the court?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Talking to my mom now, her and I are really close, and she makes this joke. She was like, I used to ask you what you wanted to major in school, and you say basketball. And she was like, no, like you can't do that. But when I was 12 years old, I sat my parents down, and I was like, I want to play Division I basketball, and I want to go overseas, and I want to travel the world playing the game that I love. I told them that at 12, and I think it's because I watched Love and Basketball, which is a psychological thriller. Bad. Now that I look back on it as an adult, not a great storyline, but that's when I realized what was possible, and so had some ups and downs to get there. But the game took me all over the world. Now that I'm not playing, it's still taking me there, but I had a moment where I tore my ACL going into my senior year, and I didn't play for the entire year. And that was the first time I realized like I didn't really know who I was outside of the sport. I didn't know what I liked to do. I didn't really explore myself past being an athlete. It was a challenging moment, but it was probably one of the most rewarding moments that I've ever had, because that's when I was like, nah, no, it's bigger than the sport. Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question. So you have Winners Win is your brand, is your business. When was the first time that you felt that idea of winning? I think one thing that we carry over with us into our adult life is just like these words that we hear when we were younger. And I know that coming from a military background with your dad and him introducing you to basketball and things, we stick with like these words that we always carry with us. So what was your first win? Do you remember your first win and why you carried that word with you until now?
You're making me think. You know what I just went back to? I used to be outside just on my hoop, just dreaming about what could be. And I used to just have these like flashes of the future, but I would just be playing basketball. And when you asked about winning, I think in my mind I just was like, I don't know how, but I'm gonna win. And then as I got older, but very specifically once I tore my ACL, and I was like, I had this dream, this goal even. I saw very clearly of where I wanted to be as a basketball player. But that was the first time it was really, really threatened. And it was like, people say people don't come back from ACLs at time, especially it was 2010, things weren't as developed as they are now. And so it was a question about, do I have what it takes to still get to where I said I wanted to go? And so the process of getting back, it was very challenging, but that was really the first time I set my mind on something that my parents didn't give me the goal of, here's you got to get these grades, or my coach didn't give me the goal of, hey, we need you in the game doing. Like, it was me deciding, am I going to do what that physical therapist the doctor and the trainer said, and then buying into that process, it gave me a whole lot of confidence of, yeah, I got what it takes to win. And it started off as just a mindset, and then it turned into some other things, and eventually my company right now.
So as a coach, I feel like with sport, it's got to be difficult separating what winning is at life and what a winning mentality is to a group of kids, really, like they're kids who, it's a very clear win and loss when the buzzer goes off. So how do you get in the locker room, especially, how do you instill that kind of like, there's like a higher purpose that we're trying to achieve in being successful at life and being a better person and knowing how to navigate challenges in life versus still wanting that good record at the end of the year, that championship at the end of the season?
Yeah, that's still something I'm learning to navigate, and especially like being at an elite environment like Montverde Academy, it's for me always about the process. And so I'm always encouraging to our student athletes of just like, the process is not the result. The process is how and who are you showing up as every single day. And that's the win. The wins will take care of themselves on paper once we buy into the process. But the process is really the bigger picture. It's not about the win. We do want to win, and we need to win, right? That's part of the game. But you're here because we believe that you can do it. But who are you showing up as in the classroom? How are you showing up to your teammates when you're communicating with them and you're not having your finer moment when there's adversity? Who are you showing up as when you feel like it's not a good day and you still got to be here? So it's all about the process. I think that kind of ties into that holistic development piece.
100%. I think that's very interesting too, because with Art of Fitness, we're mostly trying to get people to understand what the different dynamics are and like different approaches to fitness and how it's centered around a very holistic and individual kind of approach about like knowing yourself, and also about the process, falling in love with the process as opposed to just focusing on the outcome alone. So I feel like that's a great point.
So one thing that I think I love the idea of winning, right? I love the idea of winning, but I also think that we do a disservice of not thinking about what a loss means. So I'll give you a quick example. My high school football team was the worst. We won like 3 games, and but I learned so much, and it is hilarious. But I learned so much about winning in those moments of loss because, I always have that idea of, when we won, the coach said, "Oh, Monday off, take Monday off. We're good." And then, but when we lose, we're running sprints. We're doing all of the correction things. But I always thought, what if we did the same? What if we focused on the correction things after a win? What if we went back into the lab after that win? How much better will we be? So what do you see the difference in people or in yourself versus when you take a win or when you take a loss? How do you react the next day?
Yeah. You made me think back. Sorry about your football team.
No, we were terrible. We were the worst.
You made me. That's a really cool question because I thought about that. Like my very first year at Montverde Academy. So I'm one of our assistants. And my first year came out of me playing basketball professionally. And my first year, we won a national championship. Boom. Coach said, T, that don't happen people's first year, so don't get comfortable with that. The very next year, we played against the same team in a championship game. We lost by 2 points. Now, our approach after the national championship win was a lot different than our approach after, in terms of now we're reflecting exactly what you said about, okay, what could we have done differently? Where did we drop the ball during the season? What could we have adjusted? What do we need to adjust? And so that kind of made me think about maybe I should value this moment even more. But furthermore, I came back last week from a PGC camp. So I work for a company called PGC Basketball. And you said the word lab, and it made me think about how we kind of frame to the kids going into that week. It's like you got the lab and you have the stage. And this week, we just want you to be in the mindset of a lab, meaning this is where you can try different things. This is where you can mess up. This is where you can make mistakes. Matter of fact, if you try something and you make a mistake and I see you try, I'm going to celebrate the mess out of you because that's the only way that you can learn. And so it's really hard for us in that moment, though, to frame that and reframe their mind because they're so used to being on the stage, always being evaluated, always, if they make mistakes, you're going to come sit next to coach. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
No,
but yes. Yes, it's really important.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting too, is how you handle the loss. I feel like it's like also an analogy to life. If we're taking sport, and like sport is life on a very, very small scale, and like how quickly you can bounce back, or like treating every loss as just a learning experience. And it's very interesting to think about winning is just like accumulation of, you've had losses as well, but you're taking each one and they're data points for you, and you're learning from them to help push you in the direction of really winning, which I think is phenomenal. So what do you think is, if you could pick a handful of traits that belong to someone who is, by your definition, a winner, what would that be?
A handful?
I'll give you a handful.
Maybe, okay. One, I would say seeks out feedback. That's one, like not just accepts it, but like goes and says, hey, I need this. The person that seeks out feedback is coachable. Those kind of go hand in hand, but is coachable to life. And a third one, I would say, just has a relentless work ethic. A winner. Man, I'm on the spot, man. Oh, man. I feel like I'm... has grace for themselves. Now, that's one that I kind of just recently would add in, because if you crash, like we're all going to make mistakes and crash, if it causes you to just be so, well, hey, man, I'm a human, make mistakes. Let me get back up and try again. And then for, I guess, number 5, I would say has joy doing what they do. Now, if you would have asked me that when I was playing, different. I would say completely different ones. But now those would be the ones, because you got to have fun with it. It won't always be fun, but joy.
Man, well, so take me back to when you had that injury, right? What was it about that injury that you learned about yourself? What was mentally, how did you mentally pull yourself out of it? Like you said, the world was telling you like, oh, your dreams, you might have to pick you might have to do something else. What was it that that you learned in those moments about yourself that now you can teach to others, and that you care? I'm always a proponent of, you go through things so you can tell other people, not for you. So what would, if someone had the same injury, kind of the same circumstances, what did you learn about yourself that you can tell that person?
The first thing is I wouldn't have got out of it had it not been for my support system. So that was huge. Like, I realized how supportive my parents and even my siblings, who we cracked jokes on each other growing up. And then in that moment, they were like, all right, she's not her best. Let's kind of, find a way to support her. But I learned that I was like really goal oriented in terms of, if I got a carrot in front of me, as long as I know what that carrot is and I got the path to get to it, I'm gonna get there, figure it out. And I remember my doctor had a great doctor. I forgot his name, but he was a great guy. And he was like, look, if you can come back, he's talking to a 16-year-old girl. It's like, if you can come back and your leg is as straight as it can be and it's bent to this certain degree point, I'm going to give you $20. That was my carrot. Now, my carrot, of course, was getting back on the court, but do you know that every time I was watching TV during the commercials, I'm doing my exercises before at night, and then I started to just really realize that I loved work. Like, I loved the process of like, okay, I'm seeing the progress. All right, boom, it hurts, but I'm pushing it. And I just kind of learned how driven I could be, but most importantly, that if you don't start working, there is not going to be, how am I going to frame? If you don't work, you're not going to get the momentum, right? And so that's what happens to a lot of kids, is they'll stop and they'll start. And I had an athlete, actually, she tore ACL, one of the best guards I ever had. And the pain was a little thing. She has a low pain tolerance. She would start and she would stop, and she would start and she would stop. And her knee was different. It's different now. She doesn't play as the same. But what I learned was that momentum really drives the progress that you need. And I took that just into life.
Oh, I love that. So a lot of what I took away from that is small wins. Right. I think we always focus on a bigger picture when we're thinking about winter. We're thinking about Jordan Game 6. We're thinking about like the big win, the tour, the PGA Tour. Like we're thinking about like people's most glorious moments when you're thinking about a win. But one thing that I had to learn about winning is that there's small wins in every step. The big one is the one that you celebrate. The small wins are the ones that keep you going, like you said, the momentum. And for me, marathon training taught me a lot because every run, after I got done with every run, that's a win. Like if I got done with a 10-mile run, it's like, all right, I won. I can go on with my day, right? And I think that what most people don't realize is that your goal is going to be stacked. Like you're stacking days, wins. You get this win here, you get this win, you get this loss, but then you come back and then you get to enjoy the glorious moments. So what was some of your glorious moments as you stacked a lot of these small wins?
First of all, anytime you're running over 3 miles, that's a win. So I'll applaud
Facts.
you. I'll applaud you. I want to go back though. You reminded me of a quote that I read it somewhere, but I kept having to tell myself. Because after I came back from the injury, there were no schools interested in me except for 2 junior colleges. I started to tell myself, baby steps are still steps. Baby steps are still steps. And during that process of being injured, yes, getting my range of motion back was a huge win. Getting to be back on the court, even though I wasn't fully ready, it was a huge win. Getting my first scholarship was a win, but then being able to feel like, oh, I'm confident again, that was a huge win. So for me, the wins, they started to look differently than I thought they would look. And I thought that my wins would be like, oh, I got a full Division I scholarship, and that's my win. By the time I got there, I was so mellowed out because I had learned to enjoy the process, that the small wins started to kind of feel like big things to me.
I love that.
Wow. So as someone who I would regard as like a high performer, like you're very driven, motivated, is there a time where you may have benefited more from pulling yourself back a little bit instead of like going like full speed ahead towards the goal? Like, have you ever found there was an instance where, kind of like slowing down the pace or maybe having to go in another direction or pivot was more in your favor?
Definitely. Maybe not during that time, but definitely during my career, specifically when I got overseas. I had developed this like animal-like hunger to being better. And I don't think that I was prioritizing my recovery the way that I needed to. And my knee, it started to, be banged up a little bit. And so I did a little research on athletes who had longevity in their careers. I started to, pop up on people like Sue Bird, and I was like, okay, she's a great example. What is she doing? And I started to realize that I'm not eating enough carbs, but also like I'm just pushing and trying to figure out why are my legs so heavy, or why am I, kind of cloudy in my brain, or why this. But yeah, definitely had to learn as a pro to pull back a little bit and prioritize my recovery and take care of myself physically and mentally and spiritually as well.
So tell me a little bit about like going overseas and playing ball, because I think the examples that I get from when people go over, they're like, it's a culture shock. The food is so much different than what we eat, and I think it makes it harder to keep your nutrition the same because the food's different. You're in a different place. You don't have your support system. You don't have your comfort systems that you have here. So how did you navigate being overseas, and was it what you wanted? Like, was it the thing that when you got there, you were like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted, where I wanted to be?
Yeah, it was quite the journey. I was in a different country almost every year. So my first year I was in England. So it was an English-speaking country. It was an easier transition. Then when I went to Portugal, the language barrier, the basketball wasn't as good, the resources that year wasn't as good, and so I had a huge adjustment. Went to Spain, went back to Portugal or Romania. So Overall, it was a great experience. There were pockets in it where I was like, if I didn't go to junior college first, I wouldn't have been able to make it.
Really?
Because the big word, whenever I talk to other people who went overseas, we're like, you got to learn how to adapt. And if you don't learn how to adapt, or if you're just stuck on, man, when I was at my school in the States, it was this, that, you're just not going to make it. It's very demanding. The pressure is high because they need you to perform. It's typically 2 Americans allowed per team, or imports, but they're usually American. And they pour the most investment in them. If you don't perform, Christmas is coming, December, that's around that trading period, you're going to be back on a plane going home. So there was always like a monkey on my back, like, I got to get it, which kind of is understanding why I was really pushing myself. But also, I had to learn, like, when you get to those countries, they also are expecting you to be integrated into the culture. And so I had to, my first couple years, I was kind of isolated, just focused on basketball. But once I bought into, hey, we got these locals, and my teammates here, they've probably been together since they were 7 years old, 8 years old. I started to enjoy the process more, but also have a bit more success.
So I know earlier you also mentioned too, like in terms of like that enjoyment that you just mentioned, how you were saying that you can have joy in what you're doing, even though it's not happy all the time. Mm-hmm. So how did you learn to find that difference and what that meant for you in your journey?
Man, I used to be so hard on myself. Like, right now, one of the things that I speak with my players about is your emotional regulation and being able to get back to even keel. Because we're passionate, we're competitors, that's what we do. And so it can be easy to just be like this or let a bad moment just tank. And I was like that really, really bad. And for me, it was really reflection and moments of like seeing my coaches and my players' reactions to me and realizing that how I was approaching things, it was like, this is a game at the end of the day. Yes, it's my career. Yes, it's a job. It's very important that I'm successful at it. But I'm not going to be as successful at it if I don't enjoy it. And so I just started to kind of try to find a balance between letting loose, not being so stressed, but also doing the best that I can. And I wish that I had better language to tell you how I integrated the two, but it was really more awareness than anything, and experimenting with like my mind and saying, just let it go. Just, hey, come on, just laugh. And I would smile more in practice. Just to try to smile more, make jokes with my teammates. My personality started to come out. I'm pushing them like, hey, I need a better pass, but come on now, guys, let's get it. Hey, let's go. And so finding that balance really helped me, and it carries on to my coaching style.
So what is the age range of the kids that you're like that you're coaching right now?
Yeah, so with PGC basketball, so what that is that's kind of like my summer thing. I'm a director, and I coach something called Point Guard College. Okay. And I have the 9th through 12th graders. I said, don't give me anyone younger than that. Right now, I want those dogs. I'm trying to get them to college. So I have the 9th through 12th graders with PGC. And at Montverde, I'm with the national team. For the national team, we're somewhere around 10th through 12th grade.
Okay.
We had a few freshmen before, but we try to recruit older players.
What is the biggest difference that you see in the kids now? Because like when we were growing up, and it was like I remember a time where we didn't have phones. We wasn't like, we had social media, but it was like you had to go home and get on the computer to go get on social media.
For sure.
Now it's so different because you can be in the middle of a game, and just an example, you can be in the middle of a game and a playoff game, and then you can literally go to your bench and find out that the team that you're playing next or things like that. So it's like so many different distractions that you can that you have now versus what we didn't have then. So what do you see the biggest difference in the kids now, and do you think social media is affecting them a lot different than it affected us when we were growing up?
Yeah, social media is definitely, and with the rise of AI as well. And so I say the biggest difference now is that they have so much information at their fingertips that coaches, we have to be more strategic about how we approach that type of kid. Like, they got all the information. What do they want to know, right? They want to know why. And I think before, in the past, it was kind of like, this is what we're doing. Even this may be how we're doing it. But it wasn't a whole lot of why, because it was like, do what Coach said. Yeah. And so we really got to be more intentional about giving the rationale when we're coaching and teaching. And so social media, does have a big impact on that. But what I've seen is a lot of coaches are like, old school. I grew up with old school coaches too, but we got to adjust if we're going to reach that kid. Mm-hmm. If we're going to have that intrinsic, that buy-in with them, we got to give the rationale and the why.
Yeah. Mm. So at that age too, like given that they have so much information, have you ever had players that were kind of taking it upon themselves to try to figure out ways to take better care of their bodies or like have a longer lasting career, like using AI for that purpose? Or does that usually fall into your territory as like a coach to try to get them to like tap into the recovery and the lifting, or like how do you balance that?
Yeah. So we have a mixture of kids. I remember with that question, we had a player a couple years ago. She's now at the University of Alabama, but she was like very independent in terms of that. She's like, Coach T, I've been researching. I needed more protein. I gotta get more carbs. I'm not hydrated. And she was very different. She was one of one. But for the most part, right, teenagers are not really going to be doing that. But my other role at Montverde is student athlete development coordinator. And so my whole role is to create programming and implement it for all the athletes when it comes to off-court development stuff. But we do have a sports performance team, and we just been working on how we can make it accessible to all the athletes. We do some sleep performance stuff. We do some, it's really cool over there. We do some teaching them about nutrition and teaching them about how to take care of their minds. We're bringing on someone this year, a good friend of mine, and she's mental performance, but really she's a board certified behavior analyst. And she does some cool things with blending behavior science with what we want to see on the sports field. And so, yes, to answer your question, it does fall into my territory with not just teaching them everything, but connecting them with the right resources so they can be successful.
One thing that you said that like is big with me, and Mac knows this, sleep.
That's why you looked at each other.
I was like, so I am one of those people who I do not sleep at all. And just recently, like early this year, I got the Whoop, and I looked at my data and I'm like, how am I operating? Like what is going on? So like how did sleep play a part in your recovery? But then also, how do you tell a kid that's like has all of the energy in the world? We're talking about like 14, 15-year-old kids who are just like, why do I need sleep? Why would that correlate to me being good on the basketball court? What's the information that you give to them?
Yeah. I wish Coach Tim was here to teach you all the details. But I do remember when I was a junior in high school. I don't know what I learned or what. I went home and told my parents, my bedtime is 9. I told my parents that in high school. I was like, I'm going to sleep. I need to sleep. I don't know. I wish I could remember what I was taught, but I took it upon myself, and I was one of those kind of athletes. A lot of these athletes are not like that. So back then, again, giving them the why and the rationale, and I don't have the science behind it, but essentially, we just try to get them to understand that, hey, you're a high-performance kid. You came to Montverde Academy because you want to be the best. Do you want to be the best? Raise your hand if you, yes, we want to be the best. Your body is a Corvette. It's a high-performance car. You're not like the car I had in college, the little broke-down Honda I had. You are a Corvette. And if it's a Corvette, we got to put the best things inside the Corvette. We got to put the fuel inside of it. But also, we can't run it into the ground. And so for us, like, we have all these workout blocks. We have some in the morning. We have some at night, after practice, all throughout the day. And I had an athlete, great athlete. She was super driven. She was at all of them at one point. I said, no, hey, ma'am, how's your grade? She's straight A's. Okay, how are you doing? You need to sleep. She's like, no, I just got to skip. And that's the mindset that they might see on social media at times. Like, I got to grind, Coach T, to get it. And she's from out of the country, so, she has that mindset even more of like, I got to make sure I get it. And so it was kind of just like that, taking those types of athletes and really walking them through like, this is the reason why, if you want to reach your goals, this is not something that's going to stop you, rest, but rest is a productive activity. Let me show you why.
I think that's incredibly powerful for young athletes to understand as well, because I work with a lot of young athletes for their sports performance. And a lot of them, and their parents also, which I think goes to, I don't know, I'm going to have to ask you later what the thing is with parents, or like how involved parents are. But as far as the young athletes, getting them to understand that working harder is not working smarter. Like there's, especially when you're at a certain level, you cannot outwork poor sleep, poor recovery, not having enough capacity in your muscles and your tissues to actually keep up with what you're doing. So how do you think, or how do you differentiate popular kind of trendy grind culture with actual winning culture?
How do I differentiate it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is huge. You know what? Even within our school, that's something that we are rewiring even the staff to understand, because I don't know how many years, it seemed like this is new. This is new, I would say maybe the last 10 years of people starting to understand, like, maybe that grind, don't sleep mindset is not the best. And yes, we got to push, but I always tell them to listen to their bodies. And you tell me, I don't know if that's the best thing to tell them, but you think so?
I think so, because I think when I ask athletes, they tell me, like, I'll have a tennis player come in for an hour of work with me after their practice day, and they just had 7 hours of court time. And like, had I not asked, I wouldn't know, or they wouldn't tell me, because they think that they have to push through stuff like that. But I'll say, how are you feeling? What was your day like? What have you already been doing today? How'd you sleep? What's your body feeling like? How much do you feel like, how much of yourself do you have to give for this 60 minutes? Because physiologically, there's only so much. It's kind of like when you're cramming for an exam late at night. To some extent, you could keep staying up and forcing yourself, but you're going to stop getting some benefit. And that's how training is as well. And I feel like when you've developed trust with that athlete, they'll tell you how they're feeling. But I think as coaches and adults, and parents especially, I keep throwing parents under the bus. I feel like we have to do a better job of asking, because a lot of times, sometimes the athletes don't know that's something that's important that they should share.
Yeah, I love that you said that. The communication piece is super important when leading young people. And at times it's usually just like, I'm telling them this, but it's not an actual dialogue about, like you said, what they're actually doing and how they're feeling. And that T word, trust, is really important. Yeah.
And I think too, just going back to what you said, Mac, I think that most people have this idea of like grinding, but they don't realize, like you said, going back to your idea of studying late into the hours, how much information are you actually retaining? At some point, you're just up doing the thing. And I always going back to like just training marathon or running or just being fatigued when you're in the gym. At some point, you're just practicing bad form. You're tired, you're not putting the weight up like you're supposed to, or you're not running like you're supposed to. So most people think, okay, I'm doing it, but I'm doing the thing. But then now you don't realize 2 hours was really good and you did real good practice, and then 5 hours where you were just practicing bad form for 5 hours and you weren't getting anything out of it but the that dopamine release of being like, but I was here. So I think that's a difference between just staying up and cramming and actually doing solid work.
Yeah, I think like as a culture, we praise the commitment to showing up, but we also need the awareness to know, okay, it's time for me to go home. Like there's nothing good is going to come out. Like my mom used to say, like nothing good happens when you're out after like 2 a.m. or something. At some point, you got to know nothing good is going to happen after you stick around in the situation. Your dog tired, like you're not in it. You're not putting the quality to actually get the benefit. But I think people fell in love with the first part of like, at least I showed up, which is commendable, and that's still important. Like that's discipline, you know what I'm saying? But you also got to know when it's time to walk away. Yeah.
That's huge. Absolutely.
So let's talk about after sports.
Okay.
Let's talk about that athlete that, I think most people don't realize that most athletes that, or even high performers, don't go off to play professional sports, whether it's overseas in the NBA and WNBA, any other sport. Most kids, once they're done, they got to go get a regular job, or I would say regular job, or start a business, or things outside of sport.
Yeah.
What is one of the biggest lessons that you've learned yourself, or kids that you watch that had that all-star mentality, that spent so much time in the gym, because we've all seen it. If you've been around, from high school to college, we've been around people who were like, that's all they thought about. Like, that's all I'm gonna be about. I was terrible at school, but even I thought about it. And even I had this thing, like, even after high school, I was going to go D1. It's like, bro, you didn't even have the grades. But everybody had, if you were growing up in that just with that thought of, I'm going to play a sport past high school, you had that mentality. So what is the biggest lessons that you've learned or that you've seen someone else go through that you can share with people?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, for me, I was like, there's no plan B, no plan B. But what I did learn along my journey of playing is what I was passionate about outside of sports. So I started to realize, like, wow, this is what I want to do. When it's over, now this is what I want to do. And what I've seen, what I've experienced was a little different. I had some friends who I got to observe while I was playing, and I was super fortunate to watch people crash. And my grandma would always say things like, you can watch people and learn from them, or you can learn for yourself. And I would watch where people didn't find a way to attach to their purpose and didn't find a way to explore themselves outside of their sport. And then when it ended, a lot of times abruptly, maybe because of an injury, it takes them way away from who they really, really want to be. And so I was very intentional about that. So while the path is not going to be exactly how you want it to be, it is really important to do some self-exploration. And so even now, like, now that I'm recruiting and talking to players, I always ask them, like, what do you like to do outside of sports? Most of the time they're like, I just play my sport. I'm like, no, mate, me at all. But it's something to mentor them in. And as we build the relationship, just start to share little pieces of my story or give them examples of real life stories of people who, as an athlete, as a career, it's the shortest career. And before you get gray hairs, it's over. Like, it's over. Professionally or college-wise is what I mean. You can play your sport as long as your body's working, but if you're going to make it a career, you need to start thinking about what your second career is going to be.
I like that. One big thing, I have a deep appreciation for coaches, and I think that what coaches do, mentors do, it's selfless, because a lot of times it's something that you're doing out of your own pocket, or you're doing just because you take a liking to a kid. Short example, I always tell people about my reverse Rudy moment. So I don't know if anybody out there has watched Rudy. That was one of my favorite movies when I was growing up. It's Rudy. And I remember, like I said, didn't have the grades to go to college, but I remember there was a coach that he was like, you're going to go on this college tour with me. And I'm there with two other people, and they were actually going to college. They were actually going to get recruited, but he was like, you're coming with me. He knew my situation. I knew my situation. And in Rudy, the guy was like, you're not getting on this bus. You don't got the grades. But what that coach did for me is showed me something different. I'm a inner city kid. All I seen was inner city kid stuff. So you can only imagine the road I was hitting down. And that coach took a liking to me for what reason I don't know, and showed me something different. And I always go back to that moment when I'm about to make a decision, because I realized that was the turning point in my life, when I realized, okay, I can either go this route or I can go this route. Tell me a time when you seen a kid that was going to go down a different route, or you notice traits in them that you were like, if we don't course correct right now, it can be bad. Is there a time where you seen a kid do that? You don't got to give us specific names, but was there a time like in your coaching career that you see a kid going down the road?
Yeah, that's a super powerful story, by the way. But yes, thinking about that, I feel like for you, that's kind of where you develop, like, let me have grace for another person. And I think about that similarly, because when I grew up, I was always in trouble. We won't got to talk about that now, but I was in trouble all the time, referrals and just a mess. And I'll tell an example of when I was doing these camps. So as a director, I got to be really stern. And the kids are there. It's a very expensive camp. It may be their only opportunity to do something like this. I had a couple kids who snuck out. They did something I would have definitely did when I was their age. And I found out, site manager told me, hey, T, these kids, and on my job, I'm supposed to send them home. That's what I'm supposed to do. Send them home, focus on the other 90 kids at camp. And I'm talking to them, and as I'm listening to them, all I could see was my face. Like, I'm looking at them, and I think about the coaches I had and the teachers I had who would not give up on me. They just wouldn't. And so in that moment, I said whatever I said to them, but I let them stay. And in that moment, I think me showing them that grace was kind of like an acknowledgement of what the coaches have done for me, but also hopefully giving them another chance to say, all right, I can try again tomorrow, which we don't always get second chances, but it could change you.
I think that's powerful as well, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, Darnell, about how, like, you know, we don't go through things just for us. Like, it's an opportunity for us to extend grace to somebody else, or like it offers you a different perspective of like, okay, maybe there's room here for us to do something different. Like, let me lean on what people had done for me, which is why this conversation for me is so cool, because of how you came and spoke to us, and how that at that moment, Taneka had come in as like a guest speaker for us, and it was a group of athletes who were trying to navigate our identities outside of sport. And at the time, my situation wasn't like, I think I'm going to go pro or anything like that. I kind of knew that the ship had left the dock. But I was still really struggling to learn about who I was outside of sport, and the things that you were sharing had impacted me like so deeply. Like, even years later, I'm like able to pass on to some athletes, like how you talk about, you ask them what they like to do. I still get that blank stare from them, and it makes me realize, like, yeah, like some kids need to be at the very least asked those questions. And like, it doesn't have to be anything profound or like sitting there lecturing them, but even just something to get the wheels turning is stuff that they'll carry with them for years.
Yeah. That's so cool that we had that moment, and look at us now.
Yeah, look.
That's cool.
That's dope, and it's really cool to see, because it just speaks to the experience that having someone that you can look up to, having representation, having someone that looks like you is big in just in sports, period. And I know I always get on my soapbox about this. Mac has heard this 150 times, but you know, it just goes back and speaks to how we're introduced to sport, how we are conditioned to think that once you turn 25, your career is done. Like, you're an old man, you're an old woman in sport. And that's one of the reasons why I love endurance sports, is because I always am reminded of that 70-year-old guy that's doing the Boston Marathon, or, you know, the 50-year-old that's run 10 marathons, or all of these triathlons. And I think in our community, after you reach a certain age, and especially it's like ESPN, you know, they LeBron's an old man, but you're like, in the grand scheme, he's not even close to being old. But that's how it's conditioned, because they're always thinking about the next up. Who's the next up? Who's the next person? Oh, he's 19-year-old. He's the youngest to do this. And it takes the longevity out of what we can actually do. I know people who are twice my age and is doing like phenomenal things in sports. And I think that's one thing that if I notice about like sports, and if we can have a hand in changing it, is having kids understand that, like, you're not an old person at 25. Like, you don't gotta like be thinking about retirement right now. Like, there's sport afterwards. And even if you're not doing the sport that you grew up, even if you're not doing basketball, man, go do pickleball or something like that.
Or pickleball. I love pickleball, but I'm not gonna change our subject.
No, go. I mean,
got excited.
I guess that was my my next question to you is, what is some of the things that you've gotten into that carry on your identity in sport that's not necessarily just basketball?
Very recently I started playing pickleball. So we got a little community of coaches over at Montverde, and hey, you playing pickleball on Wednesday? And I was introduced to it. There was a tournament You know Jennifer George?
Yeah.
Yeah, she put on a tournament with the University of Florida women's basketball. I was introduced to pickleball. I might quit coaching basketball. I love the sport so much. But in addition to that, I just try to stay active. I'm in the gym pretty much every weekday morning before I get to work, and giving myself a goal, like pushing myself towards it. I love my pull-ups. I'm always doing my pull-ups and seeing how far I can go. I have these ebbs and flows throughout the year where I work out less and work out more, but I like physical challenges and having like a community of people around it, whether it's coaching friends. There's something in Orlando where I live called Orlando Women's Basketball, and they get together and play pickup games, and they even started a league. And first time I was introduced to it was right when I finished playing basketball professionally, and they were like, "Do you want to play?" And I was like, "No, I do not want to play," because that's when my relationship with the sport was still kind of like, I felt like I had to be a pro to play, and if I was playing anything less than in terms of my ability, then I'd be disappointed with myself. But once I allowed myself to go and play, it was so fun. Met a lot of people, and so just always trying new things. Golf is next.
You're gonna have to get out there with us.
Next.
I've only been out there
it.
one time, but I'm hooked.
I'm going on Sunday.
Y'all are athletes. You got it.
I'm
You
hooked. I'm hooked. All it took was
Yeah.
one time. I'm gonna have to get some bags and a little polo. I had a good time, but I also wanna go into the idea of on your guest info form. I was reading through it and I'm like, first of all, everyone, I wish we could just mass text this out to everyone in the world, like just to see even just some of the responses to the questions to get a better idea of kind of like what your journey was like. They were blowing me away, but the number one thing that really caught my attention was your idea of fitness is stewardship, and it's something that you can do for yourself to be better for yourself and everyone around you. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that idea?
Yeah, that word stewardship is really important to me. I do see everything that I do as a purposeful thing. I try to be purposeful. Like, I'm not just here. If I'm coaching these girls, I'm not just here. If I'm in their life, like, I got to really take care of this opportunity and make sure that, I'm not just doing it frivolously. And so fitness is a big thing for me. One, because how am I going to show up as my best self mentally, physically, like for these girls? When I work out, when I train, I feel the best. But also, I know that these are 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old girls. Now that they're in college, I hit them up. Hey, I'm in Columbus. One of my players, she's going to see me. So I'm in their life. And there was a moment where I came back from a workout and I was training one of my girls. And she was like, look at Coach T. Like, I want to be like Coach T when I grow up. And her saying that, to me, it reminded me of how I felt about my coach in high school. Like, I wanted to be like her. And she was always taking care of her body and pushing. And she was so busy, but she did the things. And so when I think of stewardship, I think of how am I impacting the people that I am called to lead. And they may never say it, but I know they're watching my habits. And I know they're watching my approach. And as long as my knee's feeling good, can I get out on the court with you as well and show you what it looks like? So, yeah, super big for me.
Wow. That's powerful.
I love that. And it's going back to like representation and, just the experiences that you have with other people. For me, and just like going back off of that, like for me, I remember being up at a track one day and I was a bigger guy. I was 300 pounds at some point. I was like losing weight. I always had this self-consciousness about myself. And I remember being up at the track and this little girl, she had to be like 6. And she was like, "You're so fast." And I remember thinking like, oh my God, like that is like a compliment to me. But then I also, in that same moment, I realized she sees representation. Because she sees someone that looks like her, someone who isn't the ideal runner, and to even think about that as a 6-year-old, to be like, that's something. So I wonder if that little girl somewhere is somewhere right now running track and killing it right now, and she's like, I remember I seen someone that looked like me, and and now I'm at where I'm at. So I always think about representation and who you might think you are and who someone else sees you as. It's two different things.
That's an interesting thing. And people say representation matters, but I think I don't fully, I have not, especially growing up or younger adult, conceptualize what that really means. And that a young person that sees you, they're not thinking representation, but the way their brain is processing it, they are seeing someone that they're like, okay, I can do that. I can be that.
Well,
huge.
going back to the beginning, think about your relationship with love and basketball, and you internalize that to like be that engine to get you to where you are now. Like you said, you might have looked at it, you might look at it a lot differently now, but you know, I think that one thing that we do as adults, we don't give kids the respect of thought as we do. We're like, we're adults and we have this complex view of the world. But just think about like when you were a kid and you like literally you said, I sat my parents down at this young age and said, this is what I want to do.
Facts.
But being an adult, you can't conceptualize that. You're like, how was I what told me to go to sleep at 9? You know, so you know, we don't give children that idea. We always think like, hey, we know better, or not, and not in a bad way, but we always think like, I have these life experiences, so I've learned this. This is how I operate, but not realizing like these kids are experiencing life the same way we have, and you know, so I think it's always an interesting perspective to have about representation in kids. But tell us a little bit about this book.
Oh man, the book. I should probably talk about it more in life. I wrote it, Winners Win. I wrote it when I came back from my first year overseas. And I'd always been a writer. I loved language arts. I loved to write. I didn't think I was going to write a book. But I guess like what made me write it was more divine. I just had this burning, like, oh, it's time to write a book. I had these life lessons, had these experiences. By then I realized like, okay, I feel like called to help young people. And so I put my life experiences down in a way that could help someone else and combined it with some faith-based principles because that's what pushed me to be successful. And Winners Win is a book that I originally wrote for young athletes, but rereading it now as an adult, it's a book for anyone who might feel, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do. Or they might feel like, do I have what it takes? Or they might feel like, man, I want this goal, but I'm so tired of waiting. I don't know if it's for me. Like there's so many phases in my journey that I was able to place in here that I think can help anybody.
I remember when we got that book, and I was reading through it, and something that had stuck with me that continued to kind of push me along, like one of the, hopefully not as a spoiler, you need to go out and get the book. But one of the things that stuck with me the most was kind of like this concept that it's bigger than you. And that, like, I feel like that's very helpful when you're trying to kind of problem solve and work through something that at the moment just feels like it's kind of just towering over you. So kind of like just the idea that you're working towards something that's greater, like a greater purpose, can help you muster up the motivation to like start acting. Yes. And like start putting kind of like foot to pavement and taking steps towards it. And that's something that stuck with me for a while.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Sometimes I need to go back and reread it again.
It's a good read.
Yeah, thank you. That's a huge one because especially in the moment, especially as athletes, we can be so tunnel vision. Absolutely.
So it's interesting. When I was going to ask you, have you ever gone back and like really reread it? Because I find that most people, especially like I'm big on journaling, and I always dabble in a mindset of like, I'm gonna write a book. One day I'll write a book, but I'm still collecting experiences right now. Every day is something. But I always wonder, like, when people write books, when they go back, I know you said that it's for the athlete, but now it's for everybody. But I wonder if you wrote it for yourself. I wonder if those lessons can teach you a lot about where you're at now in life.
Darnell, you're deep. I'm for real.
Sorry.
No, that's good. And I say that because when I was writing it, I felt like I was like healing pieces of me. And I've talked to other authors and they said that same thing, where it's like they were going through things when they were writing it because you're like pouring yourself out, but you're processing. Mm-hmm. You're processing things that have happened. You're processing why it happened. You're you're like extracting the wisdom out of it. So I think I probably did write it for a younger version of myself, a little bit older version of myself, and probably a future version of myself too.
That makes sense. Yeah. I find that in just going back to like the idea of writing a book, I'll listen to a book that like gives me inspiration, and I'm always like, because I do audiobook. I love reading, but inner city kid. But I love listening to books. But I've always found myself when I'm listening to audiobooks, I tap into like this memory that I'm like, where did that come from? And I always think of how that memory or how that place in my life when I was younger has guided me to being who I am now. So I'm always interested in when people write books, especially like I said, I'm in that place where I'm like, should I write a book about my experiences? But I'm also like mindful of being like, how has all of these experiences collectively put me in a position where I'm at now? So
yeah, that's a real place. And I think that's kind of reflecting on it. Like when I was going through it, I was pulling out, man, when I was in junior college, this happened. When I was in high school, this happened. When I was 12, this happened. And it definitely was a collection of everything coming together. Okay. Yeah.
I like that.
Write that book.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it.
That.
One of these days.
The big question that we like to ask all of our guests is, what makes, in your opinion, from your perspective, what makes fitness an art and not a science?
What makes it an art and not a science? Y'all are so deep.
And you can take as much time as you need because he's a wizard with the edit.
I think now that I've never been asked that. That's such a cool question. I think that I would say. Now I wasn't very good at science. I want to say that, but I think maybe as I'm talking this through with you guys, science seems so concrete. Science is like, you got this formula, this is the formula for that, and this is exactly how it needs to be done to get this result. But art it's a feel. Art is based on you. It comes from inside. And fitness, especially as you look at all the different types of modalities of fitness, it's like it was an expression of someone else. Like even like Zumba, like that's fitness, but it's dance, it's culture. But you're still getting it done, and it's holistic. So who is to say what is holistic? It encompasses everything. So yeah, I would say that science is concrete more, and art it is a cause for creativity, and fitness is that way. It has been for me because I had to get creative depending on what was going on with my body.
Wow,
love that.
That's perfect.
I love that. Well, you heard it here first, guys. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in for our wonderful guest. Please go out and get our book. Where can they find your book at?
Yes, you can get it on. I won't say don't get it on Amazon. Don't get it on Amazon. You can get it on www.winnerswininc.com. Okay. Right there.
I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you for joining us for another episode. I'm Clutch. This is Mac.